I had someone ask me this day, or this week, I had someone ask me this week, where around here can you get snow tires, Wayne? I didn't have to answer them because after I got done laughing, they got the message. Yeah, we're not prepared for this down here. But I'm going to be coming out of Revelations. But my first verse is out of Revelation, verse 27. And there shall in no wise enter into anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abominations, or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. I didn't read the whole chapter to kind of save time. Hopefully, there's a lot I want to say. But what this is talking about is literally in this chapter, it's talking about heaven. So what this verse is talking about is what's not going to be in heaven. It's describing heaven and what's not going to be there and what is going to be there. What's not going to be there, it flat out says, is sin. Anything that defileth or whatsoever worketh abominations. Things that miss the mark of God. Of what God said it's a standard. Sin. So sin's not going to be in heaven. I recently had a conversation with somebody who, by the way, I'll say this person has been a Christian for a lot longer than I've been alive. But we still had a conversation a couple of times this week on this topic. I know no sin is going to be in heaven, but I can't comprehend how I'm not going to sin on a daily basis because I'm not perfect. Even though I've given my life to Christ, I'm not perfect. I didn't just automatically, I just wasn't just made just some perfect being that I'm never going to sin again. And it does say in the Bible all over the place. It refers to our Christian walk as like a race. You go on to perfection. And you may never reach that perfection this side of heaven, but we're supposed to go on. My answer to that was, you need to get your mind right about sin. The difference between our carnal nature and sin. The argument was, or my argument was, that there is a difference between carnal nature and presumptuous sin. I want to take you to Psalms 19. Psalms 19. We should know this. We've heard it quote a lot. Verse 13. Keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sin. What does presumptuous mean? I wrote it down so that way I wouldn't, because I don't have internet, I can't Google it right now. Presumptuous. The failing to observe the limits of what is permitted. So when you're sinning, you're choosing to go past the limits that were set for you by the God that created you. It's a choice. But it says, keep back thy servant from presumptuous sin. Let them not have dominion over me. Then shall I be upright, and I shall be innocent from the great transgression. So you have to get it out of your mind that just because that when you first got saved, or anytime you do sin and you ask forgiveness, and God forgives you of your sin, and not get tripped up that there is still a carnal nature that is inside of you that you can't ask forgiveness for. If anybody tells you that you can ask forgiveness for your carnal nature, that it's your problem to deal with and not God's, I dare would call them a liar. You were born with it. You can thank Adam and Eve for that. The very first ones. They were very first humans. They were the very first ones to sin on earth. They were the very first. Because of the curse that brought on by that sin, everybody who is born with a biological father is passed on carnal nature. It's in us. And we cannot ask forgiveness for that. We can only give that up to God and let Him deal with that. The problem what most people have with this is that they think just because they're bent towards stinking thinking that they have to do some rotten living. You don't have to. It's a choice. The Bible describes sin as a choice. It's presumptuous. So you can get up, just like the Bible says, take up your cross daily. You can get up every day and to say, today I'm going to decide to not get pulled into my carnal nature. I don't have to, because my God's stronger than that. I may not be stronger than that, but He is. And I'm going to rely on Him that even though my nature is to react worldly when things happen to me, that I don't have to let what's in here take over what happens out there. That I can just turn it over to Him and let that pass. And not let my carnal nature turn into presumptuous sin. You have to wrap your head around that and stop using it as an excuse. But it does say in the Bible, as it does, 100% it does. The 1 John chapter 2, verse 1, we have an advocate, Jesus Christ, to our Father. For when we sin, oh, wait a minute. It doesn't say that. It says, if you sin. It's describing sin, this, in a Christian's life, not as the rule, but an exception. If, then you have an advocate. You have to get it out of your mind and stop using that verse, even though it's 100% true, like a get-out-of-jail-free card in the game of Monopoly. Think about it. Have you ever played the game of Monopoly? I have. When you got that card, you make a lot of decisions you want it and play that game a lot riskier than when you don't have it. A lot of Christians use that verse as a get-out-of-hell-free card. Unlimited. It doesn't matter. It's like they just got it, like there's a stack of them. Advocate, 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 advocate. And that's not the way it says it works. It's not when you sin, but if you sin. So your mind should be off of trying not to sin. Wait a minute. I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to be thinking of trying not to sin. No. Tell me where in the Bible it says you're supposed to be focusing on sin, period. Whether it is or not to. I've used this example before. I said when I worked overnights for 12 years, I learned this the hard way. That when you're driving down the road, especially two-lane road, and you got a lot of riding here where you got a lot of curves and turns, and you gotta pay attention to what you're doing. If somebody comes around the corner and they got their high beams on, and you'll focus on that truck and not on the road, you automatically start swerving towards them lights, and you don't even realize it. I'm not saying you're supposed to close your eyes and not look at the truck and hope everything's okay, but you're supposed to be aware of the truck coming, but be focused on the road ahead so you can go past it without swerving in front of it. If you're always focused on not sinning, your focus is still on sin. That's where your focus still is, instead of on what it's supposed to be. What are we supposed to focus on? How do we focus on something? What the Bible tells us. Because how to focus on something. I use another example. The difference between carnal nature and sin, and presumptuous sin. There's a pothole not too far from the house. Pretty good sized pothole. I got a couple of family members can tell you. Every time we leave the house, coming back to the house, there's a pretty big pothole. I know where it is. It's my choice. I can't do nothing about the pothole. There's nothing I can do about it. I can go around it because I know where it is. It's my choice. And it's my choice if it's my own fault, if I run over it day after day after day after day, what's eventually going to happen? Eventually that tire's going to pop. That's what happens with sin in your life. Eventually you can't handle it anymore. It builds up. You can't just keep just throwing it in God's face that He's your advocate. It builds up in you, and you can't handle it anymore. And you just start. The devil takes advantage of that, and you're thinking, well, maybe I'm not really saved. Maybe I'm really not a child of God. I know this because I've had people come to me with this, where it's just so hard. If I'm just going to, I've tried so hard, but I'm just still got so much sin in my life, and I just can't deal with it anymore. Maybe it'd be just better if I just give myself over to Satan, if I'm just going to be this way anyway. And they just don't know the difference between their carnal nature and their presumptuous sin. It's like, just because the world is pulling you this way doesn't mean you have to give in to it. But because they don't know the difference, every time their carnal nature pulls them to the world, they think, well, you know what? I'm still worldly. I still got sin in me. And since I'm thinking this way, then I have to do it. A bird can land on your head, but it's your own fault if there's a nest on it the next day. You got to, right then and there, shoo them off. Don't let it turn into more than what it is. You can go. So just try it. Just try it. I dare you. Say, tomorrow I'm not going to sin. It's a choice. Philippians. Let's go to Philippians. Philippians chapter 3, 14. I press towards the mark of the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. So, no. When I gave my life over to Christ, I did not become a perfect creature. But right here it says I need to press towards it. I do need to go for the prize. I need to stop using my carnal nature as an excuse to sin and start heading towards the prize that the Bible says I'm called for. So what are we supposed to do about carnal nature? What are we supposed to focus on if we're not supposed to focus on not sinning? That's what I say. I think that's where most people get caught up. They're so focused on not falling back into sin that they're not focused on what they should be focused on. It tells us in chapter 4 what we're supposed to be focused on. Chapter 8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Stop worrying about who you were. Stop worrying about generational sin. Oops. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Stop worrying about this. Stop worrying about all the potholes that's before you and that's in your life. Stop focusing on the good things that God has for you and go around them potholes. Just because Grandpa and Daddy had this problem doesn't mean that you have to. I'm saying it's a struggle because it says right here you have to press towards it. It's going to put pressure on you to get past it. But you have to make the choice to look for the potholes and go around. Now, I don't know who needs to see this, but I had an idea. I say I had an idea, but I don't want to take credit for it. I believe God gave me this idea of an example. Because I'm the kind of person that you can tell me something all day long, but until I see something, until I do it, sometimes I need to see things to really grasp it. So I got a little example. I think we need to do more stuff like this. Instead of just talking about it, give you an example so something to think about. All right, this is you. It's amazing. I started noticing everybody wearing blue today. I got blue bows. I did not plan that out, but there's so much blue. This is us. Think of this bow as us, because me, you, everybody else who's born in this world, because we're not born perfect like we're supposed to be because of our carnal nature, because of Adam and Eve, once again, thank them, we're born with this void in us. We're born separated from God the way we were meant to be. So a lot of people get caught up in that. Well, I mean, whether they believe in God or not, you can tell someone's searching for something. There's a void in them. We got to fill that void. This is not supposed to be empty. This is supposed to hold something. We're supposed to hold something in our hearts, just like God. So we tend to fill it up with something we're not supposed to. I love Reese's Pieces, Zach, but I know they're not good for me. But I picked them for this very reason, because we start thinking, well, it won't hurt. One won't hurt, just like one sin won't hurt. But let's get real. One Reese's Piece is not going to satisfy nobody's hunger. Nobody from me and Wayne until the littlest person who's here. I wish you boys were here, because I was going to use him as an example, but he's not. So we think, it just doesn't satisfy. We don't feel that satisfied. So we start doing more. And it just doesn't quite fill it up, does it? And it's just day after day, sin after sin. We just can't get enough of it because it don't really satisfy. And before you know it, your life is filled with stuff you don't need in your life. That's what your life becomes consumed of. You don't need it. But then we have somebody, let's say this person asks God for forgiveness, and they start all over. No more Reese's Pieces. They start all over. They say, God, please forgive me. And they decide to make God something that they need, something more healthier, the center of their lives. Now God's the center of their lives. Oh yes, we have an advocate. So when we sin, he can take care of it. But once again, because we use his grace, and we use his mercy, and we use his avocation as an excuse. Oh, I'm not perfect. I'm going to sin every day. Next thing you know, it's hard to see Jesus in that life, is it? And a Christian that thinks like that. But let's say we start over again. Let's start over. Let's say we finally decide we're tired of living like that. A Christian that doesn't seem no different than the rest of the world. And we start over. And we decide, once again, Jesus is going to be the center of our lives. But this time, instead of making excuses for ourselves, we stop worrying about our past sins and what trips us up, but we start thinking about what is true. We start thinking about what is just. We start thinking about what is pure. We start thinking about what is lovely. We start thinking about what is holy. We start thinking about what is virtuous. we start anything on these things, it does anything worth thinking about, anything good and pure and holy and godly, that's what we should think about. Oh my, it's hard to get. It's kind of hard. I'll clean it up later. It's kind of hard to get in there, is it? It's kind of hard to get stinking thinking in the first place to let it turn to rotten living. So my question to you today is, which bowl are you? Which bowl are you going to be? Because born won't hurt. Lie. And with that, I'm going to call Zach and Miss Susie up. And you know what? I'm going to ask Wayne. Wayne, will you come up and pray for us?